Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. I don't know. It's so bright outside, but yeah, it's still the evening. So it is great to be here. It is a privilege to be speaking here tonight. I am substituting Yari. He's on a different mission. He's on a mission in Latvia. He has a girlfriend there, and the deal was that we switch. He got the girl and I got the ministry, and it is a great privilege. I'm learning a lot of things. I'm learning about ministry, different aspects, different perspectives, culture, and I'm learning new things about your culture every day. And Wednesday, I found out that apparently in the evening you eat tea, and so I was surprised. What does that mean? So apparently that's dinner for you. So yeah, and today I've decided to talk about the secret to evangelism. It sounds very exciting. I didn't have a different name for it, to be honest, but it will be about evangelism, and more specifically, it will be about 1 Corinthians chapter 9 from 16 to 27. So, first of all, I want to say that I am not a typical evangelist. I'm not like Graham or Yari who goes on streets and evangelize to people. I'm not one of those. I evangelize a bit differently. I approach people and I get to know them, and then they start asking questions, and I get to preach by answering their questions. So we will be looking into 3 points. These are that first, evangelism is a calling, not an option. Number 2 is evangelism requires love. And number 3, evangelism is a race. So I will ask first to read the first bit, which is from verses 16 till 18. Yeah.
For if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast of. The necessity is laid upon me. Yes, woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, I have been entrusted with a stewardship. What is my reward then? That when I preach the gospel, I may present the gospel of Christ without charge, that I may not abuse my authority in the gospel.
So we see that this is Paul speaking, that the gospel is not an option, it is a responsibility. He takes it very seriously. And he says, woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. It is not an option, it is a necessity. So, first point is evangelism is a responsibility. So, Paul does not give a view of preaching the gospel as a hobby or a ministry for a select few. It is not just for a few people in the church. He sees it as a divine calling. Number 2, the gospel is a privilege, not a burden. So it is a lifestyle. It is not as seen as a burden on you or anybody. It is a privilege because there is a goal and there is a reward. And number 3, there is a reward in heaven. And we will talk about the goal and the reward later on. But for Paul, sharing Christ or the gospel was not about personal gain or his own recognition or his own reward. And there's a lot of studies out there, but this study is about sharing your faith in the church or outside the church. Barna data shows that many Christians feel a calling to share their faith. In fact, a half of practicing Christians, about 52% of those who attend church at least monthly and say their faith is important to them, strongly agree they personally have responsibility to tell others about their religious beliefs. It is put very nicely, about 52%, which is only half if you look at the global church. As we heard before, there's about at least 2.4 billion people who are claiming to be Christians in the world, but only half of them feel the responsibility of sharing the gospel, but Paul sees it as a necessity. It is not a choice. There is a poll done about the faith-sharing tools in the church. So when they teach about faith, they teach about how to share their faith, how to share the gospel. These are, you can't really read it. I can't even read it, actually. But the idea is, I can show you later. But the idea is that when we think about sharing the gospel, we want to debate. And actually, debating is at the very bottom. Only 3% of the part of their curriculum in teaching how to teach gospel, how to spread the gospel, is at the very bottom. Only 3%. But at the very top, 84% of the material is teaching people how to share their own story. And nobody can argue against your own personal story when you tell your story. Obviously, you can't base your whole argument on your story, but it would be very not honest to people. But it is a very good tool to share the gospel by sharing your own story. If churches are indeed preparing Christians for a healthy dialogue, that could be a strong foundation for moving forward. As it stands, non-Christians, which are outside the church or atheists, are just as likely to disagree, about 44%, that Christians are good at listening. So 44% of non-Christians claim that Christians are not good at listening. Shocking. Almost half of Christians are not good at listening, as they are to agree. So 43% agree that they are good at listening, but the other part is that they're not good at listening. And after having heard about a Christian's faith, they don't always walk away feeling heard, cared for, or open to more information. When it comes to faith sharing, there may yet be a disconnect between churches' training and Christians' execution. So there is a big disconnect between what they teach in the church and what they actually are executing outside the church when they're sharing the gospel. So moving forward, we're going to read second part, which is from verses 19 to 23, which is emphasizing evangelism as that requires love.
For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win them all. And to the Jews I became as a Jew, and that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, not being without law toward God, but under law toward Christ, that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be partaker of it with you.
Thank you. So we see the core idea of this section is that I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. And I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. So it is, let's move forward, evangelism as seeing as a requirement for love. The first point is that evangelism requires love that meets people where they are. Paul did not talk to or act from his position, from being a knowledgeable guy who met Jesus. He was chosen, but he met people where they are. So he humbled himself to meet people where they are. Love requires stretching. Paul said, I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. So it requires stretching, and everybody knows, especially the people who are married. I'm not married yet, just so you know. Yet. Me and Joel talked about it today. But love requires stretching. It requires being humble. It requires commitment, and it requires to be stretching and in many ways. And the gospel cannot be compromised. Paul did not change the message. He adapted his approach. He didn't change the message of the gospel, of the good news of Jesus Christ, but he changed his approach. So it is a very good example for us how to live our lives. And talking about evangelism that requires love, that meets people where they are, how does it look like? I put them in 3 steps. First, there is the approach. Simply find anyone who you think would be open to the gospel, or, also looks are deceiving, which we also talked about today. Looks are deceiving. People may look like they're not open to the gospel, or they might be open to the gospel, but nevertheless, you have to go to people. You have to meet them where they are. You have to approach where they are. And okay, next step, you have to identify them. You have to identify their world views, which are basically what they base their own understandings on. So you have to identify the problems in their worldviews, or just the differences in their worldviews and their understanding about different topics. And the third one is challenge them. First, I wrote, you have to attack, because Paul kind of attacked people. He approached, he identified, and then he attacked, but I put it nicely. So you challenge people. You challenge them by asking different questions about Jesus, or just sharing your testimony. And you need to be backed up. You can't just be blowing smoke, as I say. You can't just be making stuff up. You can't be telling things just because you heard it. You have to be knowledgeable yourself. You have to be prepared. Ultimately, we have God who is our backup. We know we're convicted that God has created us and has created the earth, and He has a good plan for us. But we also have to be confident in what we know. Talking about the approach, there's an example that I want to share. Entering another culture in such a way that one will be accepted and welcomed can be described as taking a backing in approach. In the missions field, or some missions classes that I've done, it is a very popular idea how to approach different cultures, and it is called the backing in approach. And there is an illustration, if you can see. So apparently there are elephants in the world that use this. So there are pools of water, and it is all surrounded by elephants. And when another herd of elephants come, they also want to drink the water. But so how do they solve the problem? So the new herd of elephants, one elephant chooses to back in, touch their bums, as you say, to make them know that there's a new herd who wants to drink the water. And then the original herd, which are surrounding the water, they make way and they let the new guys in. So this is the backing in approach, which we can also apply in our lives when we approach different cultures. And talking about cultures, there's cultures in church, which involves many people, or there's a culture or a circle in the church, which involves a smaller amount of people. And we know that there's different cultures in the church too. And also, an individual has its own culture. So when you approach somebody, you have to realize that you can't just barge in like, If it's an elephant, you can't just run in and you can ruin it. You ruin somebody's day. But if you back in and then you realize how to approach somebody nicely, then it may be a better result at the end. Identification. It is understanding their worldviews, and you can ask many questions. And here are some examples. For example, where did we come from? You will understand somebody's understanding or worldview or religious beliefs on where did we come from? How did we get created? Why are we here? Somebody might believe that there isn't a creator, there is no God who created us, but he might still have a purpose, of understanding of a purpose. Why are we here? Where are we going towards? What is the goal? What is the end? What are we striving for? Or what is the purpose of life? What is wrong or what is evil? Or what is good? So you might also have another perspective on somebody's religious beliefs or ethical beliefs. What is good? What is evil? So those are tools that can identify their worldviews. Love requires stretching. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. I have become all things to all men. It requires stretching. To the Jews he related as a Jew who were under the law. He knows them very well. He knows the people. He knows the culture. He knows the laws from the Old Testament. He was very knowledgeable, very wise. And he became as a Jew. It didn't mean that he was necessarily following the laws, but he became as one of them to win them. And to the Gentiles, he related as a Gentile. So this one is a tricky one. So with the Jews and religious people nowadays, we know who they might be. But with the Gentiles, they are seen as people who have no law, who are people that say that they don't need any law. They're not following even their own country's laws. They're like free people, and those people are usually the sinners who don't have practicing sinners. They don't have many ethical beliefs. They just live their lives as they were brought up in a secular society. So what does it mean to become as a Gentile, to become as one who sins? We know people in our lives who are like these people, who are not afraid to call themselves sinners, who don't care about Jesus, don't care about God. And how do we approach them? How do we win them over? Well, it is a tricky approach, but overall we can't compromise the gospel. Whatever we do, we can't compromise the gospel. Even Jesus sat with sinners, so it doesn't have to be like you don't have to sin with them, but you have to sit with them to approach, to identify their worldviews, and then share the gospel. And to the weak, he became as weak and related as weak. It is the same idea as described in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. Just before chapter 9, Paul was talking about idolized meat, eating idolized meat. And he was mainly speaking and relating to the people who have a weak conscience. And this is really important in the church. Even though we come to church, we claim we're Christians, we still have our weaknesses, we still are weak in conscience. I think that we all are weak in conscience, and we all need to learn more. We all need to be more mature. It is a growing practice. We can't claim that we know it all. just because we come to church and we listen to all Graham's sermons. So we need to learn. Our salvation is not based on our theological understandings. So we all know different aspects, different perspectives of the Christian theology, but it is not what saves us. What saves us is the belief in Jesus, loving God and loving all people, which is the main commandments. We can adapt our methods without changing our message. Our identity is not primarily our nationality, culture, politics, or background. Our identity is in Christ. So talking about the weak in chapter 8, Paul says, "But when you thus sin against the brethren, and would there wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble." It is not necessarily speaking about specifically eating meat. It is about anything that we do. For example, if somebody in the church has struggled with alcohol, I will not drink alcohol, even though I know that it is not going to affect me. But if it affects my brother who Christ died for, I will never drink alcohol again. And we can transfer that to any kind of topic in our lives. For example, I know that you guys like your King James versions and New King James versions. Yeah, I know. Me, using my freedom to use any translations I wanted, I approached you with all the scripture with New King James Version. I hope I didn't offend anybody. But yeah. And also back in Latvia, I come from a Baptist background. That's how I was brought up in the church. Those were my people, and Graham knows them. But this last year, I started singing in a choir in Riga, in the biggest Baptist church in Latvia. And the story how I got there, there's a girl involved, but we don't want to talk about that. So when we were practicing, some guy was whistling, and I like to whistle too. Yeah, maybe that was you. And if you've been around me these days, you know that I like whistling too. And there was an older guy who looked at us. He's like, "Stop whistling." And I've been in the Baptist church all my life, most of my life, but I didn't know that it was a thing that Baptists don't like whistling in the church. And I asked why. He said, "You can't do that." So, I backed up. I didn't continue. I didn't stumble him. So I let it be. But the most important thing is that the gospel cannot be compromised. To those who are without law, as without law, not being without law towards God, but under law towards Christ, that I might win those who are without law. So he's talking about the people who are basically weak in conscience, or to the Gentiles. So it is also speaking about in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. Paul, he was, if not one of the most knowledgeable people at the time about God, and he says, if anyone knows or has the knowledge, including him, he basically doesn't know anything. We don't know much about God. We know only this much. compared to what God actually is and all the theology that involves that. So we have to be humble against God and against approaching other people too. Last section is evangelism as a race. Go ahead. Let's read. Yeah.
Do you not know?
Is it on?
It's on.
Oh.
Do you not know? Oh, that's really loud now. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we are for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified.
Thank you. So the main idea here is discipline. But I discipline my body and bring it to subjection. So Paul finishes the chapter with the image of an athlete and a race. So it involves discipline, and I want to share a little image about me. A couple weeks ago, I ran half a marathon for the first time, and again, there might be a girl involved, and you might figure it out now that what is my weakness. So the picture on the left is before the race. It's my friend Robert. He's I would say he's my best friend in Latvia. And we ran together. Obviously, we ran different paces, but coming up to the race, we had, especially him. He's a runner. He knows what he's doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just there for the race, for the prize. And there's a lot of discipline involved. I couldn't do whatever I wanted. I couldn't go to bed late. I couldn't eat whatever I wanted. There was a lot of carbs. And then running, I had to eat some sugar and drink water and all that. And it wasn't easy. It took a lot of discipline, but I did it. So that the image on the right, that's fake. I wasn't a winner. It was AI. But I thought it was funny. Evangelism is a race. Evangelism requires discipline and sacrifice. Everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. So athletes denied themselves many good things for the sake of victory. They denied good things for the sake of greater things. Jesus, like that, Christians must be willing to surrender rights, comforts, and preferences for a greater goal. It needs intentionality. In verse 24, run in such a way that you may obtain it. Nobody wins a race by accident. You have to prepare, you have to sacrifice, you have to be willing to give up your time, resources, whatever it takes. But you have to have that intentionality. And there is a goal. In verse 25, they do it to obtain a perishable crown, meaning the people who are running the race on earth. But he also talks about spreading the gospel as a race with our lives. But we for an imperishable crown. The goal is not personal recognition. The goal is to see people saved and brought into God's kingdom. Our reward is eternal. It is not perishable. What is a very popular sporting event happening right now? The World Cup. Everybody knows what the World Cup is here. There are, at a game, there are two teams who have prepared for years, decades, and have invested a lot of money, a lot of effort, resources to compete in that. There's a team that supports the team who are like doctors. They are trainers, physiotherapists, all kinds of people who support the team, support the athlete. And when there's a game, actually I want to talk about what happened to me. So in Latvia, we say that our national sport is whichever sport we can get medals in, which at the time in 2023, when I was in Norway, I was part of the gap year program. You remember Dustin and the team were here a couple weeks ago? And so I was part of the very first gap year. We were in Norway at a family that were, like, they opened their doors to everybody. We weren't a big group, but we were a big enough group to fill up the whole house. And we had dinner. But during the dinner, or tea, as you say, there was a game which was for the first time in history for Latvia. We were playing to get in the World Cup, or I would say World Championship, to get for the third place, to get bronze medals. And everybody was eating. I was watching the game with my Latvian flag over my shoulders, and I was very in the game. I know that like most Latvians were watching the game. And when we won, I said, "We won!" As you probably also say when Team England wins a game, and everybody knows that feeling. But what people don't realize that when you say "we won," you haven't even stepped foot on the field. Most Latvians haven't even touched a puck in their lives. Puck is the black thing that they throw around. I don't know if you know hockey here, but when we say "we won," it is just like, okay. Actually, I want to say that this is the excitement that happened in Latvia. So actually, this achievement was the biggest achievement in Latvian sports history. So it was a big deal. That's why everybody was excited. So actually, the Monday after that, the president declared a national holiday, so people didn't have to go to work. So everybody in Latvia, they were waiting for the team, and they were cheering them on, and they were so excited and so happy. And it is just the same as our lives as Christians, as believers in God, as believers in Jesus Christ. Even getting third place in the world is a big deal. They were more happy than the people who got gold medal. It was a big deal. And but heaven celebrates something greater. In Luke chapter 15:7, it says, "I say to you that likewise there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 just persons who need no repentance." So when we say "we won," we are all winners. When one sinner repents, one person starts following Jesus and turns to God, turns to Jesus, and hears the gospel, we're all winners. And all heavens, everybody in heaven are rejoicing and happy for that. So the secret is love willingly gives up its rights so that others might be won to Christ. So my prayer to you and my encouragement to you is to love everybody, no matter your differences, but there is a greater goal, there is a greater achievement to be made. Thank you, and God bless you.